Hi, this is Mrs. Chavez. Today we're going to be studying Chapter 2, The Roots and Meaning of Culture. I've broken it down into 4 different sections, so we'll be working on it kind of piecemeal. Take a look at your schedule so you'll know exactly when you need to have your homework done and when to be ready for your next vocabulary quiz and test. Okay? So Chapter 2 introduces you to the concept of culture, including many ways that geographers think about the spatial dimensions to our behavior, our learned behavior. It addresses the AP Enduring Understandings from the AP Geography course framework. Cultural practices vary across geographical locations because of physical geography and available resources. The interaction of people contribute to the spread of cultural practices. And cultural ideas, practices, innovations change or disappear over time. So when somebody asks you about what is culture, I like to respond to that question by saying culture is everything about me. It's the behavior that I have. It's the patterns of my behavior. It's how I look at the world and understand it. It's how I've adapted to the world. And it's also that social system that encompasses all your institutions, your schools, your government, and your justice system. It's the part of those regional differences that are make up human geography. There are several components of culture. Cultural traits is one, and those are things that allow one part of the culture to be transmitted to another. For example, the famous football chant of "Ole, ole, ole" arose in Spain, but has since become a cultural trait of many soccer fans around the world. The famous Greek explanation of "opa," the group of traits that defines a particular culture. Also, language. This occurs when a language is no longer in use. That's language extinction, when people no longer speak a language. So a cultural system is the interaction of these different elements in culture, where a cultural trait is very different from a social system. Sometimes both systems together are referred to as a socio-cultural system. Now, the characteristics of a place include its own cultural, political, economic, and social elements. So a cultural region is a region with people who share common cultural characteristics. And these characteristics, like I said before, are language, political system, religion, food, customs, clothing, participation in trading networks. So the entire region throughout which a culture prevails, the criteria that may be chosen to define a cultural region includes also religion and language and diet and economic development. A cultural hearth, on the other hand, these are locations on the Earth's surface where a specific culture first began. Cultural globalization refers to the transmission of ideas and values around the world in such a way as to extend and intensify relationships. The process is marked by the common consumption of culture that has been diffused by the internet, popular cultural media, and international travels and movies. So remember that a cultural trait can be an object or a technique or a belief. It can be an expression of a culture, like the ole, ole, and opa. It's the building blocks of these complex behaviors that turn it into a cultural complex eventually. A culture complex is a group of traits that defines a particular culture. That's going to be including language extinction. And like I said, that occurs when the language isn't spoken by the people living on the land any longer. Now, a cultural system is much more complicated, of course. It's going to be the interaction of these different elements in culture. While a cultural system is very different from a social system, sometimes both systems, as I mentioned before, where they work together to create that socio-cultural system. There's 3 functional areas of a culture system. One is the ecology, the way the system is adapted to its habitat. The social structure, that's the way in which orderly social life is maintained. And ideology, that's the mental characteristics of a people and their belief system and the way they relate to their environment and to their social groups completely. There are hundreds of culture regions across the globe and perhaps thousands. However, due to the tribal conflicts, colonialism, wars, ethnic cleansing, regional disasters, and mass immigration over time, nearly every culture region has changed in cultural makeup from its original beginnings, and some of them were very, very humble beginnings. Each cultural region is occupied by a variety of cultures, ethnic groups, and peoples, and diversity and cultural pluralism is the new normal for most of them. This new normal is due primarily to mass communication technologies and the ease of traveling by air. The entire region throughout which a culture prevails is the cultural realm. The criteria that may be chosen to define that cultural realm include religion and language and diet, custom, or economic development. Culture hearth is that location on Earth's surface where a specific culture first arose. Cultural globalization refers to the transmission of ideas, meanings, and values around the world in such a way as to extend and intensify social relationships. This process is marked by the common consumption of cultures that have been diffused by the internet, popular cultural media, and international travel. So this is a word you're going to need to make yourself familiar with, syncretism. Cultural syncretism is when an aspect of two or more distinct cultures blend together to create a new custom or idea, practice, or philosophy. The Kwanzaa festival, it's celebrated between Christmas and New Year's. It's a mixture of African American and Pan-African culture. Similarly, the practice of hunting Easter eggs can be traced all the way back to paganism, which was quite popular in ancient Europe. When it comes to syncretism in art, one of the best examples would be the merger of rock music with various other genres in order to produce new variants.